Lovelies. This is going to be a bit of a difficult video, I think. There's a concern, there's a worry that has been kind of percolating around in my head for a while now. I don't have a solution to the problem. I don't have any particular words of wisdom, so this is probably going to be unpopular, but I'm going to voice my concern and see what some of the rest of you think about it. There's a common refrain within the atheist skeptic, most particularly the anti-theistic movement, that even moderate religion is a problem because it provides cover for the extremists. It carries that mimetic seed forward, because even if someone has taken a moderate interpretation of scripture or whatever else it might be, the original scripture is still there, and it's usually still fairly unsavory. So in perpetuating the religion, it's like a dormant disease that could come out again and ravage the population at any point. And so while you might prioritize extremists in terms of a kind of societal triage, ultimately you will have to do something about even moderate belief in religion, argue with people, win them round. Yeah, that's usually the extent to which that idea goes, rather than anything violent or whatever else. But there is still a quite valid concern, I think, that moderate religion provides cover for extreme religion. Now, is the same thing happening with ideology? And in what way exactly? Yeah, when I got more involved in the skeptic community, broader than just atheism, it did feel a little like coming home. I think I got a kind of rosy set of spectacles on, at least to start with, but I also think that it was a more welcoming and less extreme place at that time. The concern seemed to be genuine, the people seemed to be genuine, and a lot of that has been lost. Now, a lot of that isn't the fault of the community. You know, 5 or more years of demonization and attacks and so on will tend to give people a siege mentality, and there's a perversity in some people in that they react to accusations by becoming the thing that they're accused of being. Like, I'll show you. You know, human nature is a weird and naturally contrarian thing, I think. So some of the accusations that have been levelled at skeptics, at rationalists and so on, is that by having the conversations, they're somehow platforming and promoting extremist ideologies of one kind or another. I don't think that's true. I think this community is the one that has been making the arguments against the extremists. But there could be some entryism. You do see some unsavory and extreme ideas from both sides of this kind of social justice pole, I guess. Then you see infighting over the trans issue, ignoring biological and hormonal facts. Yeah, it's possible to be compassionate and accurate, I think, but one side or the other only sees the compassion or the accuracy and reads it as the opposite, which isn't particularly helpful. And then when it comes to things like race realism and so on, I'm concerned about entryism there by the far right. Difficult ideas are things that we should be able to examine, that we should be able to look at, that we should be able to discuss, and in having those discussions we can debunk those arguments. And if they were valid, it would be the rational and reasonable thing to do to absorb that information and move on. Now, I don't think it is valid. I think our arguments against it are sound. I think it's necessary to keep having these arguments, but it is costly in terms of reputation and everything else to do this, to have these conversations. And when only one side will talk to you, the kind of gravity of change will tend to be in that direction, and that's why I think we have seen a slight slide to the right. I put as much blame on the left for being unwilling to talk to people as I do the right being overly willing to talk to people, and some people not perhaps necessarily being the best at debating these very polished arguments. So my concern then is that in the same way moderate religious folk give cover to extremist religious folk, are we giving cover to extremists in having these conversations? Yeah, my inclination is to just reject that outright, but I think there's a grain of truth to it. And the other aspect of this is that it does give the opposite extreme, the far left extreme, ammunition, and they sweep up moderates, genuine skeptics, non-entryist skeptics, in their attacks on this extremist element that is having the conversations with the skeptics that is trying to persuade them. So you'll see people mention genuine racists like Anglin or Garepi or whatever in the same breath as Sam Harris, who has a much more informed and knowledgeable position, but the opposition can't tell the difference, and so people get unfairly smeared. And I still don't think Sam has got a handle on this and can't understand why this is the way that it is. On the one hand, I don't want to be careful and politically correct in language. I think these conversations are important to have. I think this community is the only one that's actually standing up and perpetuating the information that debunks race realism, for example. Yet it's an incredibly thankless task. Radical pragmatism, rationalism, reason, these are not this is not an age of that. It's almost a new romantic era where emotion overrides logic and assumes the emotional in the logical. It's not particularly helpful. People give this all kinds of inaccurate names, like postmodernist, cultural Marxism, and other tags. I don't think it is that. But the crux of the matter is that I worry that the skeptic community, the political commentary community, is giving cover to extremists, or at least appearing to. I'm trying to figure out to what extent what answer is true there. But you've seen people like Sargon slide to the far right, not necessarily in their personal views, but in their political expression and activity and activism. That's worrying. I think Tim Pool is now pandering to an increasingly right-wing audience in the material that he puts out, and these are just kind of touchstones of a broader issue. I didn't leave the left. The left left me, but now it feels like this community that I moved to as a result of that is also leaving me, and that's quite emotional and brutal feeling to have. Now, I have my ideologies, everyone has their ideologies, but I try to prioritize my pragmatism and my detachment, while at the same time acknowledging the human element. But, to paraphrase Hunter S. Thompson, you can turn your back on a person, but you can't turn your back on an ideology. Zang.
Today. See, I don't like the, I have, okay, like a lot of you, I hate a lot, you know? But I hate with style and creativity. Yeah!